Hello everybody, it's Blue Tracks Dak. Welcome to the channel. Different format this time. I'm in the middle of another move. I guess I've done that a lot over the years, but that is going on, so all my trains are packed up, and my computer is as well this time. So I have about 4 episodes on hold that I'm going to try to get them out before the end of the year, but I probably won't have my computer back for another month. So, sorry for that, for those of you who are looking forward. But they're pretty good episodes. The next, I don't want to give too much away, but the next 4, the first one will start Emily. The next one will be about Murdoch and Hector. The third one will be about Duck, which will be interesting because I've purposely never really tried to write for Duck because it's hard to think of stories where he's central. I'm not gonna lie. But I made it a project. I want to see how would a story starring Duck work, and the conclusion was kind of what I feel like whenever stories about Duck are written. He has to be paired with another character or another concept has to be introduced. Like even Duck and the Slip Coaches was more about James than Duck. And that's just because he's a very one-dimensional character, to be honest. Which you could work with it, right? But at this point, this is just an experiment, essentially. And then the season finale will be about Rosie, which is good. The last time I wrote about her was Volume 1, and she's just kind of been in stories since then. But yeah, I've tried to just spread the love to the characters that have been introduced since the end of Volume 1 and through 2. Volume 3 had a lot of narrow gauge episodes, and I didn't get to... there's too many characters to feature everyone every season. So this year I was just kind of double backing, especially after The Secret Railway, where it was just the core cast for most of that year. So yeah, that's what's coming down the road. It's even Volume 4 is small, and that's because this year has just been crazy for me in the real world. So, but the series has and always will be a hobby for me. So it'll happen when I get to it. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say about that. Today, I was just kind of reflecting, since I can't make any actual videos right now. I thought I would just kind of talk. There's a little bit of buzz in the community these days. And over the last week or so, I guess I've just been reflecting on, I guess, what's going on. I would call the Twilight of Thomas, at least for the TV show, and it's, I don't know, just trying to collect my thoughts. I'm not really structured today, but I did want to kind of talk about these things. I guess the era going from after Legend of the Lost Treasure, going into Big World, and the end of the show. So that's kind of going to be today's mental track. So this is just something you can put on in the background, if you please. There's not really going to be any visuals at this point. So I've seen inklings of the reboot. I'm not planning to watch it. Odds are, out of curiosity, I will watch an episode or two once they're publicly available. But I've been attached to Thomas for much longer than I think is normal. Purely just out of love for the show and for childhood memories, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't feel like it's a overgrown man-baby thing to do, per se. As long as, you're not truly wrapping your life around it. Like, I I live an independent life, and to me, it's the same thing as guys who like collect comic book characters. It's just not as conventional, but as long as you're able to be well adjusted, there's nothing wrong with liking something that you've grown up with. And I've said this before, but um, Thomas the Tank Engine, the TV show, and the trains I collected growing up, they've always been a constant in my life, which I haven't had many constants. I've always moved a lot because of family. Um, there's I changed friend groups a lot. There were a lot of times where I didn't have friends because of where we were, and yeah, like I just kind of defaulted. I don't know if that's the healthiest upbringing in the world, but it was a helpful getaway. If life wasn't super fun, I could always write stories, build train sets, and kind of just pretend that I was somewhere else. And I've always been fascinated with the world. I think that's the only thing that keeps me going with like making my own series is there are so many things you can explore between the world of Sodor itself and the characters. And there are so many characters in the show that were introduced and nothing's been done with. And in a way that's annoying, but in another way, maybe the goal was just to create a world for you to flesh out yourself. And I doubt that, corporate heads think that way, but it kind of works, the goal is to create possibilities, not determine the absolute outcome. So I've come to appreciate it a little bit more just as like, hey, there's stuff to still explore. And I think that's why the fandom is so robust. I mean, there aren't, I'm not really part of other fandoms, so I don't know, but I would imagine that Thomas fan fiction is probably as robust, if not more, than like Star Wars or Marvel. Purely because there's so much unexplored territory, and it's always been marketed that way too. Like create your own adventures. That's why they made all the crazy train sets that, if I were a parent, that's a crazy amount to buy, or like you could never run out of things, which it's a good business model, but also like, that's just going to fuel almost a lifelong, affinity for the show and the characters. Because Audrey wrote a good number of books over his lifetime, but there's more to follow that. Hence, I think that's why Britt started adapting original stories as opposed to source material, and we see that that's probably what sustained the show after the 90s, because by that point there wasn't a lot left to tell. I mean, there's definitely some stories that could have been adapted, but not that many. I think the most you could have gotten out of the Railway series might have been 1 or 2 more seasons, and then you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. So I get it, and it was a good decision in a way. I think the part where things started going south is, even at the beginning though, they actually did make some good changes to the show. Like the only gripe I had with them initially was the downgrade on the merchandising, which to me, that was almost more important than the show being good, because throughout the hit era, which was lackluster at best and annoying at worst, the characters were very marketable toy-wise. Like, even though Michael Brandon was annoying and the stories are so plain, I wanted to collect, Molly, Neville, Dennis, Stanley. I wanted to collect every character because at least it looked cool and the toys were great. And I feel this is a conversation that we've already had as a fandom already, but So taking a nosedive with the toy merch was a hit, but when they combined it with some of the show decisions, where it just became apparent, it became apparent after 2015 that there were other interests controlling the show, and I think that's what killed it for a lot of people, especially I'm gonna say the older fans, because the thing is, like we've been through, I'm considered an older fan. We've been through every era of Thomas, and I think it's difficult to get that across to younger fans because purely because of familiarity. It's wild. A lot of people now in the fandom, their first experience with Thomas was the latter end of the hit era. So like seasons 9, 10, and 11. Stuff that I grew up with. Season 5 was the newest when I started watching Thomas. But like seasons 1 through 5 was all there was. So that's what I knew. And I've seen Thomas go through classic, through new series. CGI was almost a breaking point for me. Thankfully, they handled the animation very tastefully. It still felt like Thomas. It was an adjustment, but I was able to accept that. And I feel like this is kind of the same thing with fans who grew up with CGI Thomas and seeing 2D animated Thomas. It's a big shift. Even then, I still don't think it's comparable because, to Nitrogen's credit, they really did, and hit. They really did their best to preserve the feel of the Thomas world. And I think that's why there's such a split. There's a split over model and CGI for years, still is kind of, but the difference between what, like seasons 1 through 24 of Thomas and what's going on now, is just like the presentation of Sodor and the characters. And, you can look at it, like I've seen a couple pictures, and there is a lot of familiarity in it. The characters, for the most part, resemble themselves, albeit in a very cartoonish form. The animators can't be bothered to double check their work on some of the wheel arrangements, but hey. What's strange to me is how it's basically Thomas built from scratch, and they might be referencing pictures from previous eras of the show at best. And that's the strangest part to me, is that I guess what we're getting, like if you thought Big World was corporate Thomas, which it was, this is just a new level where everyone who like may have had some personal attachment to the show, hence making it good, they're gone. Like it's just a completely new team, and they're just given the property, and they're like, okay, we're just gonna make stuff up, and what you see is what you get, I suppose. Again, I haven't seen it, so I'm not gonna talk too much about the reboot itself. To me, it's life goes on. And this isn't Thomas, but life goes on. I guess we'll see. It depends. Like, the thing is, Mattel is a corporation, and Thomas is just one thing in their toolbox. And what's amazing is that this didn't happen to the show sooner. The fact that, we had holdouts for so long as to, it's important to preserve the way that Thomas is presented, because that's what differentiated it. And Tugs, I feel like Tugs perfectly encapsulates our collective fandom opinion on most things. But yeah, I don't know. I forgot where I was going with that. Anyway, it's sad to see, but also, like, Thomas, there are a few times where Thomas should have ended. Probably one being right after the Magic Railroad, and then probably after Legend of the Lost Treasure. And that's what's really strange to me, is I think the peak momentum for Thomas in the 2000s was definitely the 70th anniversary. And that's the last time I think that that old and new fans could both really appreciate what was going on with the show. It was new and moving forward because it has to. Thomas can't. If the show owners were to go back to the classic series of Thomas, like Series 1 style production, you'd get some initial nostalgia, but it wouldn't survive. There's a way where you need to preserve what makes the show unique, right? But also make sure it feels current, because Thomas is getting to the point now where the original material is going to be like watching Andy Griffith. Like, that's how far away it is. And the 80s was about 40 years ago. And that's crazy to think about. I thought it was old when the show was 20. And that was 20 years ago. You know? And I guess it begs the question, how long should a show run? In terms of TV, Thomas is one of the longest running shows out there. And it's crazy because it's a kid's... It's considered... I wouldn't say it is, but it is considered a kid's show. I think you could argue definitely that it was aimed at kids after, like, 2003. But even during the Brenner Renaissance, if you will, there was an attempt to palate to both young and old, or I guess you'd call it general audience, which is, I think, what Thomas always was meant for. Even when the Reverend was writing the books, he wrote them for kids to understand for the most part, but also so that the parents reading them could enjoy them. And I think that's why, like, a lot of the old stories have a lot of, straight up savage conversations at points, because it's meant to be entertaining, and that's stuff that a kid won't really get, because kids don't know language as well, but an adult will pick up on that stuff. So I think that Brenner did a really good job of preserving that spirit and recovering from the Thomas is a baby show perception. And the perception, that's a result of the people running the show. Sharon Miller did a lot. She came up with a lot of good story concepts, but she did a lot to shape the perception that Thomas is for people who are 3, because of the way she wrote things. Which sucks, because The Great Discovery, which I think was one of her best works, still seemed to play down too much to the most common denominator. But that was a great storyline, one that I think people of all ages can resonate with. As far as, fear of being outdone by somebody else and losing your friends. Like, that's a little bit existential. And I think that's why that movie sticks with me years later. I mean, that had a lot more substance to it than the Magic Railroad did. I like Magic Railroad purely for the nostalgia and the characters, at least for the trains, they were all like 1A as far as their portrayal. It's just an unforgettable performance. But the story itself did kind of suck, and that's why I tried to remake it into something a little bit more satisfying. But there's only so much you can do. I do think the ultimate solution there was to write a different story, but I wasn't here for that. I just wanted to pay homage to it and try to help it make a little bit more sense. And that's all it needed, I think. I think people who are watching Magic Railroad remakes already they know why they're there. They're not looking for someone to make it make sense. They're just there to kind of relive the glory days. And I am too, so that's all okay. That's way off track, though. But yeah, it's interesting to me ever since 2018. Well, actually, I think Journey Beyond Sodor is kind of where we started seeing that split because the animation was getting a little liberal with the body movements and stuff. And even I knew at that point, like, there was going to come a day where, the show was going to go downhill. And I wonder, like, what causes that? Like, after the 70th anniversary, where do you go? Like, how could you top The Legend of the Lost Treasure? I thought The Great Race would have done that, and it could have in concept, because they marketed the heck out of that movie. And I thought it was going to be this huge thing. And I guess where they fumbled the ball was the writing. And that's part that bothers me the most. I really think the reason that 2015 was such a good year for Thomas was not only was the merch good for the most part, but the story was amazing. Like, this was like Brenner's crowning achievement, I think. And he had at least enough autonomy to make it good. Whereas The Great Race clearly had a lot more meddling from the corporation. And I feel like people can sense that subconsciously, even if they don't know and they don't have like a proof that, Mattel made these changes to the script, right? They can feel when something's manufactured and when something's genuine. And Legend of the Lost Treasure is not perfect, neither is The Adventure Begins, but they don't feel manufactured, They feel like someone who loves the story they're telling in the world. It feels like, true art, which is a real expression and real appreciation. And that's not really fan service at that point, because yeah, of course you want to appeal to certain groups of fans, whether they're older or younger, but like that was just a good addition to the story collection. And I don't know, The Great Race definitely could have been that, right? It could have been maybe not better than Lost Treasure, but the point's not necessarily to be better, but to keep the thing moving forward. And they could have told a really good story about Gordon, or even if you wanted to keep it about Thomas, they just made it was too basic. They literally took the trope from the previous movie where Thomas hates the new character, and but they did even less with it, I think, is the problem. And so it got predictable, and I also feel like maybe it tried to do too many things at once. I think if The Great Race was about Gordon, or if it had a more focused storyline, it would have done way better. Because the Thomas fandom doesn't really... It operates differently, I've noticed. I've noticed that in our community, we appreciate... Even in fan series, right? We appreciate quality storytelling above all. Production is important, but... like, we love the musicians that recreate themes, and based on like how accurately they're done, right? And we like, heartfelt storytelling, I think, and that's what made the Brenner years resonate with us so much, old fans and new fans. But yeah, after The Great Race, we kind of see, especially into Journey, I don't know, actually, let me get to JBS later, but we see where it just starts to become, okay, time to pump out movies again because it's time to do it, not because we enjoy it or have a good story to tell. And I think that we would have let it slide too as a fandom and just moved on to the next movie. But that's when they started doing the animation changes. And to be honest, in retrospect, it wasn't that bad compared to what we have now. But, I mean, Journey Beyond was also just, it felt bad. I know they switched animation companies in the middle. So the movie just wasn't rendered that great. The bouncing itself wasn't a huge factor, but they did start doing weird stuff, like having the trains hide in bushes and not be on the tracks, and little things that I noticed, like Thomas fans, myself included, have a extremely acute attention to detail. So we notice that stuff, and it bothers us. And so I think, if nothing else, I know a lot of people liked Journey Beyond Sodor, but that's where it started to really splinter the fandom, and I think that was what kind of, aside from what was to come, right? That was really what weakened the momentum with the show itself, because there's not that shared enjoyment, which is really hard to create if you think about it. It's hard to please everyone. You shouldn't try to please everyone. You should try to please your audience, but that's what happened, and it just seems after that point that Mattel went all in on, we want to do certain things to get certain social points, and that's, I think, what really is leading why we are where we are now, because as we all know, Big World, Big Adventures was not about revitalizing the show. It was about creating this quote-unquote broad appeal, which I don't understand. I do, but I don't. Thomas is unique in that it has international appeal despite being such a localized universe. It's an island that may or may not be part of the UK, depending where in the show you're watching. But that's never stopped it from having mass appeal. It's very popular in Japan. It's very popular in America. It's very popular in other countries. And I guess you could pander to broaden the appeal, but I think the problem is that Thomas as a brand doesn't pander. It is what it is. And so when they finally did have to pander, they did it so bad. I mean, the most basic stereotypes put into all the characters, be it trains or people, it was so, if you were going to do this international thing, especially in 2018, you have to do your homework. You can't just, like, the international stuff they were doing, that stuff that was coming out like in the early 2000s. Like, that's how elementary their inclusion was. And you got to do better, especially when half of your fandom's on Twitter and they're looking for something to rip apart. But again, and the premise could have worked. It was just done poorly, and Mattel's not uniquely bad with Thomas. Mattel is increasingly an incompetent company. So what can be done? It just feels like they got to the set. I think that's part that bothers me. It feels like they're deciding Thomas is a 70-year-old brand, and there can't be that much life left in it, so we're just going to start milking it for the last 5 years and hope that we get our money and then it's over. And it makes me think about what's next for Thomas. After the reboot, we're probably going to get 2 seasons 25 and 26, if we're lucky, and or if we're unlucky, possibly 3. But what then? Are they gonna retool all the toy lines again? I know I saw some Trapmaster for this stuff and it looks terrible, and I'm upset because I still liked collecting the characters. I really wish Playrail would make Duchess, because that would have been a fine model, a good one to end on too. And it scares me because I feel like Playrail's always a couple years behind Trapmaster, but if they start switching to look like the cartoon, I just this is the end of an era. This isn't even the level of switching Ertl to Take Long, because at least the characters still looked the same. It was just a different medium, but now they look like baby toys, and I think that's the part that's killing me. Like, they're making this, it's actually a baby show, and from what I've seen outside of Neil Crone voicing Gordon, which is such an odd, I don't know how to feel about that. It feels, it's so refreshing to hear his voice as Gordon again, just out of nowhere. But also, it's like, why would you do this to me? It hurts. Because it's like, should I like this? And I know that I can't, because it's not the same show that I grew up with. And it's not the same universe, it's not even the same people. It doesn't have the same goals. It is entirely now, it's kind of like learning segments from from season 8 onward, but it's the whole show, and it's 2D animated. Like, I don't know whose idea this was and why they felt it was necessary. I really think it's just Mattel has fatigue with the show, and I wouldn't say that they're trying to run it into the ground, but they don't know what else to do, which is weird because you could just hire people who do know what to do and let them run it. It's not going to do worse than it is, you know? It's upsetting. I thought they might sell the brand, but they might just keep it, like, when the show ends, they just will hold it for the toys. That's what I wonder, is how long will the toys outlast the show? I say give it 3 years. In 3 years, the show will either reboot again, get sold to somebody else, or it will just stop, which, to me, I think that's fine, but it does need to change hands before someone tries to mess with it again. And I don't know, what do you do with it? What do you do with Thomas after all this time? The show has been pretty consistent logo and branding wise up until this point for 40 years. How do you change that? And Thomas has been one of the few shows that's like really hard to politicize. You know? Like, Nia was the most controversial character, I think. And it's not that controversial. I think it is weird to, like, stress the ethnicity of a train. But especially when it's been done before. Like, we know that Hero's from Japan. We know that Victor's from Cuba. But we also know Donald and Douglas are from Scotland. And that's not weird. I don't know. I think it's just, I think the problem people have with Nia is how contrived it is that she comes to Sodor. It's not impossible, but it is contrived. But I don't even have an issue with that. You can make that work. There's so many bigger things wrong with the show than that. But I don't even know, like, the way to bring back Thomas would be so impossible. Because I feel like the way that most of the fans would accept is basically you restart the show and tell the exact same stories. Like, we would go back to the 3 railway engines. I guess we would animate it with CGI. And then you faithfully retell it. But it's already been told. You know? But we can't really move forward after this point. Like, what are they... In season 28, do we just go back to CGI and Andrew Brenner? That's not going to happen. Not with Mattel in charge. I mean, maybe the series will end and they'll make one last hoorah movie. And then they'll probably be able to make toys probably for 5 or 10 years just off of the brand's popularity. But, after that, like, will people even know it enough to buy it? Kids, at least. Like, I don't know, I guess in a way this day should come for every show, but I didn't want to see it die. But that's probably what's going to happen. Not immediately, but soon-ish. I don't know. It's just a sad thing because it's been a part of me for so long. I, and at this point, I'm also like maybe it should, because like what else are we gonna do? Like we have some fan series I think will go on for years, but even they're gonna run out of steam. There are people a lot more prolific than I am, and they've done every character combination I could think of and even wouldn't think of. And I don't know, like maybe it just does need to reach an end. So maybe this is my cope. This is a recording of me doing some massive cope about the fact that the show is coming to an end. I say that because it can't last. We're not going to get 10 seasons of All Engines Go. Promise you that. It's just not going to be popular enough. And they're not going to want to do it if they're not getting attention. Like all this is, and this is all just a vain hope that they'll push the right button. It's like a monkey like hitting a keyboard randomly, hoping something works and makes the light turn green. Like, and that's not how you run Thomas. Thomas is different, even if you want to say it's a kid show. It's different from other kid shows. The entire appeal of Thomas is to mechanical people, I think. People who appreciate art, but they also appreciate the technical proficiency. I think most Thomas fans, they like learning the inner workings of how those old models worked. That was something that was definitely lost with CG. But like just the sheer effort it took to make those episodes back in the day, to make them look convincingly real, like that's its own thing. That's not the same thing as Peppa Pig or or even Bob the Builder. You know, you just don't care as much. But, you know, seeing trains on a set, which is something that you can build in your own home and replicate, like that's just really cool. Aside from the music production, it's always been good, maybe with the exception of like the early hit era. The composition was always just it was unique. And it went from just being like unique and catchy to actually good, like orchestral music. That is one thing. The Magic Road is unparalleled. Is the themes. It just gives you, even if it's the first time you've heard the song, it gives you the nostalgia vibe. And I think that's why it's so memorable to a lot of people. It's like video game music. That's the best comparison I can think of. But, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see where this will go. I did think it was funny that Edward and Henry are in the reboot after being written off the show. Like, is this like a late I'm sorry? Because I haven't seen, is Rebecca in it? I haven't seen Rebecca or Nia. I've seen Nia in ads, but I don't think she's been in the episodes of late. But I haven't been watching them. I'm just like, what was the point of Wubba if you're gonna retcon that? Although I don't know what the rules are anymore. I don't think they. Yeah, that's what am I saying? That there's no continuity with the previous show. I think if you see someone you recognize, you're just darn lucky. Which to me is no way to live. I can't appreciate the show for being better than absolutely terrible, you know? Like, I don't know, maybe they'll make it for a couple seasons and start discovering, like, the lore from the original show and be like, oh, this is so cool, we need to do something like this. That'd be funny if the 2D animators, like, have this awakening and, like, start this renaissance, and then Mattel comes in, no, you have to do crazy bridge jump again. There's definitely the potential for something like that to go down, but I don't know. I guess my take on the show is kind of similar to how I feel about Lord of the Rings. Like, you can't top the trilogy that came out. I'm not looking forward to the show purely because, like, there's no way it's going to be as iconic. It's hard to make something iconic nowadays because everyone's got an opinion. You can never just appreciate the art for what it is. Even now, like, there's, like, people on Twitter. I mean, and Twitter's not no place to go. Don't go there if you're not there. But, like, there's actual people who think that, old, like, Thomas stories are problematic, as if they wouldn't be when they were written 75 years ago. Like, remember, these people came straight out of World War II. A lot of them went through both World Wars I and II. And you don't think they're going to be a little bit harder than Gen Z in 2020? Like, come on, dude. And Thomas made its mark by being savage. It's kind of like Arthur, the show on PBS. Like, the reason it's still funny is because you go back and you watch how savage they are to each other. You're like, dang, no wonder I'm like that. It's kind of the same thing with Thomas. Thomas didn't get all nice and friendly until the hit era. And I won't say that's a bad thing. That I think over time, yeah, the engine should form more constructive relationships with each other. But it's not problematic, I mean, not to me. It's just silly. So it'd be impossible, I think, to restart the show without retconning most of what happened, without retconning a lot of the dialogue to make everyone nice all the time. Maybe we should just appreciate a good thing. What they should do, minimum, if they stop the show, is they should repackage the DVDs, keep selling the full seasons. I mean, they'll be able to make money off of that for years. So maybe that's what they'll do. And honestly, if the show quits after 2 seasons and they just resell the old ones, I think that's the best thing they could do. Don't make it worse. Like, you're already making me hate the legacy. A bad ending ruins the whole series. And the ending of Blubba, I don't think it was bad, but it was weak. I mean, it depends what you consider the ending. I don't even count Marvelous Machinery. I stop at the Royal Engine if I entertain Blubba at all. Ideally, season 21 is the end. Ideally season 20, but I count season 21. But I do like Rebecca as a character, so let's just take it all through CGI. The Royal Engine's lackluster, but it's good. You still feel like it feels like Thomas. It's not crazy. Maybe I was harsh on it in the beginning. I like it. It's not my favorite, but I like it. It was a good, simple story. It felt like, in terms of like scope, I guess, it felt like something that would happen in the early days, or like in the books. So I guess if that's the way you would want to end Thomas, it's good. I guess, though, it just felt like abbreviated. Because with Big World, you could have done a lot more. That's the thing that bothers me. Like, they could have done a lot more. And they just didn't, because they don't care. And this is all... I think when fans are upset, it's not because they're pricks, it's because they care. And I've tried to, even on both sides, even people who like the new stuff, I think it's Thomas is something that's near and dear to everyone's heart, everyone in the fandom. And so we're all very protective of it and how we perceive Thomas and friends. And that is something that I think we all need to bear in mind. I don't like arguing with people. I have my opinions, but you can have yours. I think at the end of the day, we all want to see it go on because we care about it, and we don't want to see it end. But yeah, so that's the way it goes. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on it. I don't have much more to say that hasn't been said already. I'm curious to see how much longer to hold out. Maybe Playrail will just do their own thing. I wonder if they can do that. Maybe if they license the rights, because I feel like they're kind of autonomous compared to Trackmaster, and I don't even know how that works. But man, the day they stop making Playrail Diesel 10, I'm gonna cry. That model has been unchanged since the beginning. Amazing. Oh well, I think I've said a good amount today, so if you listened, I appreciate it. There may be one more of these because all my furniture is gone. All I have to do is sit here and think. So, um, we'll see. Anyway, tune in next time. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.